what was the initial opportunity that you saw, and how did that sort of evolve? And it sounded like you had a few pivots, um,
Yeah.
and I'd love to sort of hear your point of view of sort of where we're at today with there's all the talk about millennials and how they're so different. I'd love to see how that's changed as you've sort of engaged with young professionals sort of at the start of their career.
Sure. So the opportunity that presented itself in 1991 was that a friend of mine, where I grew up in Winnipeg, Canada, was looking to expand his business into the U.S.
Okay.
And he asked if I wanted to be his partner. And he tried really hard, and I tried really hard to make the deal work financially for both of us, and we just could not. It was just one of those deals where both parties want the same end result, but it just didn't work out. So he decided then not to expand into the U.S., and I decided, you know what, this is the business that I want to be in, and so I started it in Minneapolis, where I was living. As far as the generational differences, I'm actually a believer that there are not significant differences between generations.
Right.
That I think that when people talk about generational differences, what they're really talking about is differences between people at different ages in their life. So I'm 50. I'm a different person than I was when I was 20 or 22 or 25.
Right.
I think that Steven Rothberg at the age of 25, when I started the business, would be very similar to a millennial today who is at the age of 25 and who recently graduated from law school and whose first love was small business and an opportunity presents itself. So I think that the generational differences are overstated. When people talk about millennials being much more interested in their social life than in winning the corner office, I got to tell you, at the age of 25, I was much more interested in my social life than I was in winning the corner office.
Right.
I think a 50-year-old who's past the bar scene and who is trying to make enough money to pay for their kids' college education while also saving for retirement, they're much more motivated by salary. Now, there are some differences that are impacting people who are, say, 20 or 25 years old today than there were back in the 80s.
Right.
But a lot of that is economic. So, if you graduated from college in the 80s and you had $10,000 in debt, people would be thinking you were a freak because you had so much debt. If you graduate from college today with $10,000 in debt, people are thinking that you're a freak because you have so little debt.
How crazy is that?
And so the unfathomable amount of student loan debt is burdening this generation that in a way that never burdened previous generations. They literally cannot afford to take certain jobs because those jobs pay less than their student loan payments. And very often they're better off unemployed than working in social services or for nonprofits. Entrepreneurship becomes more difficult because it can often take years before you're actually generating a living.
Right.
But in the meantime, you've got to be paying your student loans.
Right.
I think it's just a real challenge.
Yeah.
For this generation, and yet they tend to be very entrepreneurial. I think one of the reasons is that they've seen their parents go through the Great Recession.
Right.
And working for corporate America, and a lot of their parents were very loyal and had been with those companies for 5, 10, 20 years, and then got fired for something that had absolutely nothing to do with their parents. And I think that is a difference with this generation, that they do see that loyalty towards your employer is often not repaid. And so that incentivizes them to be their own boss rather than to have somebody else as their boss.
Right. So, and this comes sort of at the intersection of us really thinking about the future of work and automation. What are you hearing sort of either from either side? Because you kind of support, it's a two-sided business, right? Because you've got, corporations and institutions as your customers, as well
Yes.
as, students and professionals looking to get into the workforce. So, what are you hearing sort of about the future of work in the context of things like automation and outsourcing, etc.?
Um, yeah, I think automation is much more of a threat to employees than outsourcing.
Hmm.
Um, and um, when I see stories of Amazon opening a retail store in Seattle with no employees as a cash, there's nobody manning a cash register.
Right.
And it's self checkout in the sense that you just walk out of the store. The impact retail employs a huge number of people, millions of people, and you still need people to put products on the shelf. But are we that far away from robots doing that? So on the one hand, maybe society can reallocate its resources so that people can do more rewarding work rather than work which is just, requires muscles in their arms but not between their ears. But on the other hand, what do you do with all these people? What do these people do?
Right.
It's not like you can take somebody who doesn't have a high school education and has been working at a cash register for 20 years and say, oh, okay, well now you're going to go into software engineering, or you're going to be a nurse. I mean, it just doesn't happen. So I think just like in the Industrial Revolution, where you had a huge percentage of the population leave farms and go into the urban areas, and you had just catastrophic impacts for a huge number of people. I think we're in the midst of that. And I think a lot of the upheavals that we see politically, socially, are due to that. Do we want to prevent automation? Clearly not.
Right.
Think of how much better our lives are because most people can afford a car. Or if you live in an area where having a car isn't practical, like Manhattan, you can afford to take an Uber. Most people can do that. If you said we shouldn't have automation, there wouldn't be cars. There wouldn't be microwaves. There
Right.
wouldn't be central heating. There wouldn't be CAT scans. I mean, so that's not the answer. But I do think that we need to do a better job of protecting people and helping them. And making higher education unaffordable is just absolutely contrary to that.
And so for somebody who maybe is sort of a year out from getting into the workforce, what sort of guidance would you give? Like, what are the jobs that are going to still be around in another 10, 15, 20 years?
Yeah.
What sectors? And, besides computer programming, what are some
Right.
other sectors that you're seeing sort of growth in terms of demand for professionals?
Yeah. So this I could say generally that the types of jobs which have the most promise for somebody who's about to graduate or even recently graduated would be those jobs that require critical thinking skills, where you're adding value to the organization with the muscle between your ears rather than the muscles in your arms. And it's difficult to outsource to somebody from a different culture, perhaps even a different language, different geographic location, jobs that require critical thinking skills. There are some examples of jobs that have been outsourced. Think radiology.
Right.
A huge number of the x-rays and CAT scans that are taken in U.S. hospitals are read by people in India. Does that mean that the person in India, the physician in India, is doing a bad job? Absolutely not. But that does become more difficult. So there's some added job protection. If you go to a OBGYN or to a urologist, it's kind of hard to outsource that to India.
Right.
So medical as a profession overall, that would certainly be a profession that would be good to go into. I can't think of too many jobs in the medical industry that don't require critical thinking skills. But being a cashier, there's not too much critical thinking that goes on there.
Right.
It's in a way, a lot of that work is robotic. And so by its definition, almost, it's kind of like that's apt to be taken over by robots. So that's something that you kind of want to stay away from. The other thing is that I would encourage young people is not to worry about what professions are going to be strong 20 years from now. I say to them, think about where you want to be 5 years from now, and then go into that. Just like when I graduated and I went into law and I was a lawyer for a year and then I got up and started a small business, I think that worked out pretty well for me.
Right.
If I had sat down and said to myself, do I want to be a lawyer when I'm 60? I don't think I would have gone into law. And I think that would have been a mistake, because I think that my legal education has really helped me with critical thinking skills.
So that's really interesting. Because so you still value the time you spent in the corporate world, because that's one of the things that I talk about in my blog is that, not everybody can be an entrepreneur, but even those that aspire to be entrepreneurs, is there value in some time spent in some sort of corporate environment? So,
absolutely. And I think that there's tremendous value working in a corporation, large or small, for profit or not for profit, before becoming an entrepreneur. Right? First of all, hopefully you'll be able to save some money. The number one reason by far that entrepreneurs fail is lack of capital.
Right.
And so being in a corporate environment can afford you the ability to connect with people who have money. And maybe you can make a decent wage and save some money so that you can afford to go a year or two without making any money, while at the same time putting money into your business.
Right.
It's a double whammy. People who have always been paid with a W-2 do not understand that it's not just about the loss of income, it's also about putting money into your business.
Right.
You're not just not making money, you're actually losing money. And that's really difficult for Fortune 1000 employees to grasp. In your query too, I think you mentioned, I don't remember if you used the word intrapreneurship.
Yes, absolutely.
But that's a big deal. I think there's tremendous opportunity for people who want a good health plan and who want to get a reliable paycheck every 2 weeks to become intrapreneurs.
Right.
I worked for one. I worked for Honeywell when I was in law school and had just graduated.
Right.
So Fortune 50 company. We had, I think, something like 50,000 employees in the U.S. And my boss had worked there for decades, and he was a total intrapreneur. He created projects and businesses and used his political skills in a very positive sense,
right,
to win allies, to win budgets, to align himself with business needs. He was basically running a small business within a very large business. And he could go home every Friday and not have to worry about how he was going to pay his mortgage. And so I think that there's a wonderful opportunity for people, but it can be difficult to identify organizations which reward that,
right,
and B, get in with a manager who rewards that. So that, it's hard enough to find a job. It's even harder to find that kind of a job.
Yeah. And
so
what were? Sorry.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
What were some of the skills that you took with you from your corporate experience into your entrepreneurship experience?
I think my educational background and the work that I did at companies like Honeywell, I think more than anything else, it taught me to think about or taught me how to create win-win situations. To think about an issue or a problem or an opportunity from the other person's perspective. And just because I want something doesn't mean that I'm going to be able to get somebody else to help me with that. I have to make it good for them too.
Right.
Sometimes unfortunately, it's also a matter of making it unpleasant, the alternative unpleasant enough for them that they're willing to go along with you. But that's not the best way of motivating people.
Right.
Sometimes you deliberately have to create friction.
Yeah.
If you go into a fast food restaurant and you stand in the wrong line, you're not going to get food. That's deliberately created friction. They're telling you, if you want to get served, if you want to get some food, which is obviously a reward, you got to play by our rules. Now, on the other hand, if every single person who went into the fast food restaurant lined up in the wrong place, guess what's going to happen? The restaurant's going to change its rules to accommodate its customers.
Right.
But in an organization, if you can make it to somebody's benefit, not just through compensation, money, but also just in rewarding work. If there's somebody who has a big ego, stroking that ego, those are things. Trying to figure out if you're an entrepreneur and trying to sell your product to a company, to understand who the person is within the company and what their motivation is. And I apologize. I see that we're well over the 15 minutes, and I've got another call I got to get to. So if I can, I'll just kind of leave you with this thought, and then we can always pick up again later if you want.
Okay.
But what a lot of our customers, a lot of college recruiters' customers are senior talent acquisition leaders at Fortune 1000 companies. Their most precious commodity is time. So if we say to them, we can save you money, but you're going to have to spend a lot more time, then we will not get a sale.
Right.
They are far more time sensitive than they are price sensitive. So if we come to them with a reasonable price, not the cheapest, but we show them that we can save them a ton of time, we're going to win that business.
And how does the college, how does the person who's trying to get into the workforce benefit from that? Like, I'm talking to people from Columbia University this weekend and South Carolina University in another month. What can I say to those students about College Recruiter? Like, what is the core value they're going to be able to get from, using your service?
Sure. So the core value that they're going to get is that just like they would go to Google to find just about any kind of information, if a student or recent grad that's looking for internships or entry-level jobs should go to College Recruiter, we have 300,000 internships and entry-level jobs advertised on our site. So just about no matter what kind of a job they're looking for, we're going to have it. With small businesses, nonprofits, large, Fortune 1000, 100% of the jobs on our site are paid for. And what that means from the candidate's perspective is that we don't have a bunch of companies coming to our site and posting fake jobs to steal resumes, or saying that we're hiring salespeople but they're actually not, and then you apply to the job and they just try to sell you training. There are companies out there that do that.
Steven, I really appreciate you taking the time.
Sure.
I think you've given some great nuggets that will be helpful to my readers, and I will share with you when I publish either a blog post or podcast on our talk.
That would be great, and we will be happy to push it out. We have a couple 100,000 social media connections, so you make sure you do that.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Shirley.
All right, bye-bye.